All right. Hey, Ron Newcomb here with the Indie Coach Podcast. I'm here with my friend Mark Maxey, and this is kind of a unique interview that we're doing. Mark recently has a film that has come out just this weekend. So we are doing, he was one of my first early interviews. And so we're doing a catch up interview, a recap, and then also the launch of his and release of his film. There's no greater opportunity to be able to catch somebody just on the very weekend that it came for a filmmaker to try to learn exactly kind of what's going on, how do you get here, and what is he even kind of feeling on opening weekend is literally right here. So by the time you read this, there's definitely stuff we need to do. Him and I were talking a little off air, and we all talk about how things do matter in the context of helping get the word out. Like we all know about opening weekend, you got to go, and that's definite a must. But also there's, we have scales and rating systems now in 2025, and you got to jump on those early and often. And the two biggest ones, of course, are in IMDb. Everybody knows that one, but then Rotten Tomatoes. So if you've seen the film, I highly encourage you to go on to Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb for Words of War and leave an epic review. We will settle for nothing less than a 10 if you feel it deserves that. But it looks like a Oscar worthy performances, some great actors that you'll love, Jason Isaacs, Ben Miles, just some excellent performances. And truly, this is Mark has done some great projects already, but in my mind, this seems like next level, top shelf stuff. So without further ado, Mark, would you mind just maybe introducing yourself a little bit for people that don't know you to give a little context of history, but then let's just jump right into Words of War and just talk a little bit about the development of the project and kind of where we're at now.
Sure. No, thank you, Ron. It's a pleasure to catch up. I'm Mark Maxey. I'm a producer with the company Rolling Pictures, based in California. Although I'm actually an East Coast based producer, and we have a film, Words of War, that's kind of a political thriller about a journalist who exposed some of the atrocities of what was happening in her part of the world. She's a Russian journalist and was reporting on what was happening to the people of Chechnya at the time. And in that part of the world, reporters don't. There isn't necessarily a free press. There's kind of propaganda that's pushed out, and journalists don't necessarily have free speech the way journalists enjoy in other parts of the world. And that was certainly true in this case. This woman was poisoned and detained and beaten and persevered and ultimately was silenced. So it's a very, it feels like a tragically timely look at just the dangers that journalists face today. This is a real story about a real person. It's not a documentary. It's a narrative feature film. But these are real events and real situations that are impacting journalists all over the world. The subject of our film is one of 1,800 journalists who have been killed since the start of this century in pursuit of a story while pursuing a story. So it's just really a staggering figure when you stop and think about it, and it just feels like the right time to be shining a spotlight on these courageous people that are speaking truth to power.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, trying to give a voice to those that gave their lives for a cause that they felt worthy enough to sacrifice their lives over, because she knew the dangers. Of course, nobody expects ever to be killed in a line of duty, but people know certain dangers that they're going into. And she felt it was worthy enough to exploit what was happening, so much so that it kind of echoes through time that although this happened in the past, not so distant past, but in the past, that now in the context of 2025, you can watch a film, it still resonates and tells the story not only of her, but also of other artists and journalists, rather, I mean, in today's time.
Yeah,
And
the,
yeah,
the
it's crazy.
the the themes of her story of authoritarian regimes trying to silence the press and suppress the truth and push out their own version of the facts. Anna was killed in 2006, and here we are almost 20 years later, and yet those themes are just as current as this week's headlines. This is just this past week. Uh, there was a Ukrainian journalist, a female journalist from Ukraine, whose dead body was found with her brain removed and her eyes gouged out and her larynx ripped out, which is literally don't think, don't see, don't speak. It was a message to journalists. It was not unintentional that this female journalist's body was found in that way. So this is still just as current as it was almost 20 years ago when Anna Politkovskaya was the one on the front lines there.
Yeah, and you wish it wasn't the case. You would think in 2025 that we're logical enough to think that that stuff doesn't happen. But just as you said, unfortunately, that stuff is happening. And we have us as storytellers bear a certain responsibility. I believe that you feel that way, which is why when the story came across your table, you felt it worthy enough to pursue and help get the story out. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the origins of how you got involved, how you found the story?
Oh, yeah, there was a UK producer that I was connected to through a mutual friend, a woman named Miriam Siegel. She's done other films, The Infiltrator with Bryan Cranston, and several other things. And she was the one who really championed this and put the whole thing together. And then Rolling Pictures, my company, came to help complete the financing and the production, and then subsequently the distribution of the film. So, she was the one who had found the obituary and saved it and worked with the writer to develop the screenplay, and then got some of the lead actors attached that really helped get the project off the ground. So it was her kind of brainchild, and then we came in to actually help execute and implement and move the project forward, and that's where we are. We filmed this, started principal photography in 2022. We wrapped in the beginning of 2023, and by the end of that year, it completed post. And then last year, it's just been an interesting time for the industry and independent film especially. And so it's kind of taken us I guess by the end of 2024, we had kind of had our deals for the distribution path. And of course, at that point, it didn't make sense to put the film out over the holidays. It's not really a holiday film. So here we are, spring of 2025, and the film is just now hitting theaters. So, but I'm thrilled that it is. And honestly, I think if this film had come out 12 to 18 months ago, it almost wouldn't be as timely. We thought it was timely then, but if you look at where we are today in the world, and here in the United States especially, it's a very different place than it was 12 to 18 months ago. And so I think stories like this really matter now more than ever, perhaps. So maybe it's all for the best that the film is in theaters this week.
Yeah, you did a screening in New York, LA. It looks like you were able to get some of the actors on site to be able to do interviews and things. And part of your planning and prep and process, particularly as a producer, I imagine when you're trying to do a screening, obviously you want people there, but it's more than just that. It's really for that premiere event. It's kind of like an event. Can you walk us through maybe the thought process, the prep to ensure that you are getting the actors there? I'm sure it was pretty intentional of the two cities that you chose between New York and LA, and maybe talk about that and why one might consider both of those cities and what that does for you as a producer. Maybe talk through a little bit about your opening and what a producer in the independent world looks at.
Sure. Well, so for us, New York was our premier location. So we opened the same weekend as World Press Freedom Day, which is the United Nations Day meant to commemorate and remember journalists who have been killed in the line of duty, and just the important role that the free press plays and the importance of that. So, the UN being headquartered in New York, a portion of the proceeds of the film we're donating to the Committee to Protect Journalists, which is an organization that for more than four decades has been providing resources and information and support for journalists who are in dangerous positions around the world and tracking attacks on journalists and killings of journalists. So they're based in New York as well. So for all those reasons, and then our cast, everyone's from the UK. So flying into New York versus continuing to Los Angeles just made more sense, since every single member of the cast who attended was flying in from overseas. So no one was local here. It's all people from Harry Potter and Game of Thrones and The Crown, and those types of actors, so that caliber of actors. So we were thrilled to have them all here, and New York was the perfect place to host this premiere.
Yeah, that's excellent. Where did you all film, and were you able to take advantage of any tax incentives?
Yeah, so we wanted this to feel authentic. The film is set in Moscow, but for obvious security and safety reasons, that filming in Russia was not an option. So we filmed just over the border in Latvia. In their capital city, Riga, was kind of our home base for the production for several months, and it worked beautifully. I mean, Riga and Latvia, it used to be part of the USSR. There are buildings there that were built by Stalin. It just felt very authentic, and we were filming there during the winter, so the cold was very authentic as well. I mean, there's snowfall and you see people's
Right.
breath, and it was an Eastern European winter, and that all translated beautifully to this, cinematic landscape that was the backdrop for the story. So, and it was it worked out. It worked out well. I think also because this is a largely UK production, keeping it in Europe made more sense than trying to do this in Georgia or someplace here in the States. It wouldn't have been the same film, I think, if we had filmed it in the United States or Vancouver or someplace like that. So the decision to try to be as authentic as possible, since these are real people and real events. It's not a documentary, but we wanted this to be authentic to the people and the place and the story to the extent that it could be. So that felt right, and it worked. It works.
Oh yeah, no, in the trailer you can immediately see, and I also think that just for whatever reason, well, I mean, it's because it's not filmed in the States. In your mind, your production value already kind of goes up. Then you see that it's a period piece and it looks period. Then you see the caliber of actors that you have involved. All of that says, okay, this is interesting. This is good. And it just kind of blew me away. And then to know that story led me down a path of like finding out who this woman really was on my own before your film even came out, and the compassion and stuff that's moved to there, which is all part of the reason of why we tell stories, just solidifies of what caliber of film and the story that you all uncovered here. When your producing partner was able to get the talent attached, it sounds like you came at a little bit past that, but do you have any insight to again, thinking through the lens of the audience that's here, the independent producer, attaching talent is something that always feels a little elusive to people, and maybe talk through a little bit how that was able to get done.
Sure. Well, for all of our films, you always want the right people for the right roles. I mean, in other Rolling Pictures productions, we did a film, we produced Mayim Bialik's directorial debut, As They Made Us, that starred Dustin Hoffman and Candice Bergen. We did a film that Kyra Sedgwick directed that had Kevin Bacon and Kyle Allen and Alexander Shipp. An amazing cast there, called Space Oddity. We did a film with Katie Holmes and Alan Cumming called Rare Objects, Derek Luke. And so in each of those cases, I mean, the thing to remember is that actors want to act. You're not asking someone as a producer to do something that they don't want to do, right? I mean, you're not trying to sell them a car they don't need or something they don't want. I mean, actors want to act, and they want to act in good roles, and they want to work with good people. So, in my experience, it seems like actors are motivated by one, just really great stories. If you've got a great part for someone that fits with what they're looking for, they're going to want to do it. They could, even if it's a SAG Schedule F or something where they're not making what they would normally be getting in terms of their rate. For some people, it's about the role, not the money. When you're an actor at a certain level, you're not looking for a paycheck. You're not coin operated. You really want those great parts, or you want to work with great people. And working with great people is another motivator there. There are actors that have taken a part because they want to work with a certain director. We got Alan Cumming because he wanted to work with Katie Holmes. Kevin Bacon happened to be married to Kyra Sedgwick, so with her directing, it was easier to get him in that part. Although I'll say, actually, that he wasn't even Kyra's first choice for the role he played. But so even sleeping with the director doesn't always get you the part.
Let's get to it. Yeah.
But yeah, so I definitely actors want to work with directors that they want to work with. They want to do roles that really resonate with them, with where they are. And then in some cases, there are actors that are just looking for a paycheck and will take a part because it's easy money for a couple of weeks of their time, and that helps them with what they're doing at that point. So so I think that's important to remember for producers, is that you just need to find which of those motivators aligns, and in many cases, I mean, like with anything, you're going to get a lot of no's. There's a script that I have that I won't say what it is, but it's a great script with a strong female lead, and I think it could really be a great vehicle for someone. But all the people that I really want in that role, it's not the right time for them, or not the right role for them, or maybe not the right director, or maybe not the right money for them for whatever reason. We just haven't gotten that part filled, and so that's not the film that I'm here talking about today because we haven't been able to make it because we need that lead person that's really going to carry that project forward, and it's so important. So
Yeah. Do you work through casting directors mostly? And I'm assuming that most casting directors, there's a certain fee that you need to pay up front. And then it's been a little while for me since I've done this. So I'd love your thought on pay for play. I don't know where that kind of is recently. I don't know if they're still doing that. Like you have to commit to X amount of dollars, whether or not you are able to get the rest of the budget is on you, but you have to commit X amount to the actor. Can you talk a little bit about the casting director securing them, and then maybe what capital you would need to get the actor? And the reason is because, and you know this, Mark, when you're asking others for money investment, it always seems to be the chicken and the egg. They always want to know who's attached and are they in really, and are they going to be able to move the needle at all? So just kind of helping people work through and think through that.
sure. Yeah, I mean, casting directors are hugely important. So we've had them in every project. Not always necessarily for those first couple lead roles. I mean, generally we'll go out and try to attach our core package ourselves, and then once we have kind of those anchor actors, then that enables me to go out and close on my financing, which then enables me to bring on board the casting director to fill out all the supporting and everything downstream from there. So absolutely, casting directors are hugely important and bring so much through their relationships. They have the rapport, they have the relationships. They can get that meeting or get that phone call and work through that list to very efficiently help put together the rest of what you need. But we generally start with offers to our, two, three, or four leads directly, just to try to get that initial package together to get to that next step. In terms of pay to play, I'm not a big fan of that, so we just don't do it. I don't want to be on the hook to pay someone for work that they aren't going to be doing if a project doesn't move forward. I understand the reason for it. If you're trying to get whoever, Tom Cruise to be in your movie, they're going to want to see that you have the means to make a movie before they let you attach his name. Otherwise, everyone would have, everyone's names attached to their films, and none of those films would get made, and none of that helps the actors or the producers for that matter. So, I understand that the reason for it. It's just not something that we typically engage in with the films that we do.
Yeah. With the one of the biggest problems, I always say funding is not a problem, it's the problem. And for independent filmmakers, it's certainly the case. What are the biggest problems that indies when they face fundraising? Any thoughts about overcoming trying to raise the capital and how you raise funding in the independent world?
I mean, that's always a challenge. Just on attaching actors, I mean, one thing I'll say, the productions that we do at Rolling Pictures are all union productions. So generally across the board, these are all union. It's DGA, WGA, SAG-AFTRA, IATSE, Teamsters, the whole nine yards. And if you're working with SAG-AFTRA, um, you're going to have to escrow your payroll in advance before actors are going to be given the green light to actually get on the plane and come to your set. So there's no chance that someone's not going to get paid in terms of the actors, certainly, right? So I mean that money and not only are you putting that money up front in advance generally, but you're also establishing a reserve fund for residuals that could be payable down the road after the film's released for the actors. So that money's held by the union. So there's very little risk to the actors in terms of are we going to get paid or not because the union's holding that money. So and then as we do our payroll and file the paperwork, week to week throughout the production, then those funds kind of come back to the production to be repurposed towards other elements of production. But again, before production starts, if you're not able to show that you can pay your actors, then there is no production if it's a SAG film. So
That's right.
that's one way to try to get around that pay or play. Look, it's a union production. We're gonna follow the guild rules, and all this will be in place before anyone has to get on a plane or get in a car to come to location. And generally, we'll guarantee that, 60 days out, let's say, perhaps. So that way people can plan their schedules accordingly. So, and then in terms of fundraising, I mean that's just always the challenge is find a cast and a story that will resonate with people. I think that's part of it. And then take a look at what other films have done and be realistic with yourself. I get a lot of pitch decks from people that says, "Oh, well, this film made $100 million, and these are our comps." And I'm like, "Well, I mean, did they have the same budget you have, and did they have the same caliber actors that you had? And if their budget was $50 million and your budget is five, or less, 500,000, is that really a comparable film? And is it realistic to expect a comparable performance, in the marketplace?" I'm not sure that always adds up. So sometimes I think filmmakers aren't realistic with themselves. You got to be honest with yourself first. You definitely have to be honest with your partners and the people that are supporting you on these projects. I think for the people that finance films, I mean, films that not necessarily a great investment. I mean, that's part of the challenge is that there's so many horror stories of where things just don't go well
Yeah.
for filmmakers or investors. So, it's always how do you mitigate the risk? How do you ensure the best chance of success? Can you leverage tax credits to help, lessen the burden on your equity investors? Are you able to generate some pre-sales that might also lessen that burden on them? Might the combination of tax credits and pre-sales, get you to where you're almost even to begin with? So it's really just a smaller gap that you're trying to bring equity dollars into, and that gets repaid first off the top, which is again a lower risk situation than a huge equity burden that's behind a bunch of other senior debt, and so all those things matter. And I think it's just trying to structure things in the right way so that affects who you cast. It affects the locations where you're going to be filming. It affects how you structure your financing. If there are pre-sales or tax credits, do you incorporate that into your finance plan, or do those funds when they pay out recoup to the investors directly? So a lot of people will factor that into their financing and then borrow against that as collateral, which means that when those funds repay, it doesn't go to the investors, it goes to whoever loaned you that money using those instruments as collateral. So,
Right.
there's a lot of different ways you can structure things to try to, to benefit your investors or at least lessen the risk and ensure a greater chance of success, which is always the goal. And then you always hope that your film is the next Blair Witch and it does hundreds of millions of dollars. But that's just happens so rarely that it's good to try to do what you can to set realistic expectations and have a realistic plan to ensure the best chance of success for the people that are involved.
Yeah, you are investing, you are not gambling, and there is a delineation between the two, although they feel like kissing cousins kind of thing. They're close neighbors, but it is different. And an investment, you're de-risking, and a lot of times filmmakers they go on a little too loose, if you will, and the de-risk is not even really on the table with just like you said, here's a comp, this is where I'm going to hit. It's not grounded in reality.
Yeah, hope is not a plan. It's good to have hope. It's good to be
Yeah.
optimistic, but having hope that something happens is not the same as having a plan to try to ensure that it does. So.
Yeah, no. So you do get pitched a lot. I know if I get the right project, I'm not, it's not above me not to call Mark Maxey and say, hey, I got a fish on the line. Tell me what you think. How do you gauge a project that comes your way if you think it's going to be successful? And then maybe even anchor it onto this. What would be your ideal project? So if somebody came to you, how do you kind of gauge it and set it up? And then what's the ideal scenario?
Sure. Well, I look for things that fit with what we do and what we can do. So, rolling pictures, there are some production companies that are very genre focused. If you're
Hmm.
going to Blumhouse, you
Yeah,
know what that film's going to be. If you're doing a
absolutely.
Tarantino movie, you know what that film's going to be. We're not, and there are some people that all they do is crank out, horror films, and that's their brand, and that's not really rolling pictures. So we're less, genre specific, but we do look for more character-driven stories generally. We're not making Fast and Furious. We're not doing people jumping out of planes or car chases. This isn't Mission Impossible. So while our films have been, in the drama or the romantic or more the thriller space, they're all driven by really strong character-driven stories at their heart, and so that's first and foremost. And then our films are generally in the six to 12 to $20 million budget range, let's say. So if I get a screenplay and there's 20 locations and 3,000 extras in the first 20 pages, then I know that's not something we're going to do on a 30 to 60-day production schedule, for less than $10 million. So it needs to be a story that's realistic, that we could realistically do within the range that we do. I mean, there's a lot of production companies making 50 to $100 million budget films, and so those types of big epic stories work well for those types of producers. But you kind of have to be realistic with yourself also for what could we realistically do and be successful with. And so the number of locations, the amount of visual effects or special effects, practical effects, are the car chases, are we blowing stuff up, are we doing things that's going to really impact the budget in a meaningful way, and can we still do that? It's not that we won't take those films. The film Words of War that's out now, I mean, we created a hostage scene with a theater, hundreds of extras, and we created a Chechen war zone where we've got explosions and tanks and planes and burned out buildings and all kinds of things happening. So it's not that we're opposed to that, but that's one or two scenes out of the course of a 2 hour film. It's not the film. It's not Mission Impossible or Fast and Furious. That's all that. I think it's good to have a good understanding of what's possible and what's realistic, and give yourself the best chance of success.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, man. I mean, Words of War just it really did look so cool and amazing, or it does rather. And the cinematic, it is certainly the period piece, the location, the actors all were good, but also whoever DP'd your thing and directed. I mean, all those just you can see that it was a union part project across the board. And I know some people balk at that, but this is the very thing of why you would do this, because you at certain level to get to the union, they've had to kind of vet themselves and prove themselves out, and you end up with a caliber of film like Words of War, which is just cinematically right up there is with anything I've seen. I mean, truly, I feel like this could be like part of the awards this year. If a film fights you every step of the way, did you all have some hurdles? Well, I'm sure you did, but do you recall any hurdles that you had to overcome while creating Words of War?
Sure. I mean, there's challenges to any creative endeavor, certainly, and we've made this over the last several years, and during that period, there's been a pandemic and strikes and uncertainty and all kinds of stuff happening in the industry and in the world, all of which impacted this project in some form or another throughout its creative journey. To your point about the cast, I mean that's so important. Maxine Peake is brilliant in the title role of Anna Politkovskaya. She's a brilliant actress who really brought this woman back to life in a very authentic and meaningful way. The great Kieran Hines, who people know from Belfast or Game of Thrones or things like
Yep.
that, is brilliant in the role of Dimitri, her boss. Jason Isaacs, who's just blown up because of the success of White Lotus this season. I would have been introducing him as Jason Isaacs from the Harry Potter series, but now it's Jason Isaacs from White Lotus because he's just been
Cool.
everywhere. He's amazing as her husband. Her kids, Harry Lottie and Naomi Batrick, and Ellie Bamber, who's one of the supporting roles there, and it's just on down the line. It's Ben Miles. It's just so many brilliant actors. Ben was on The Crown. I mean, these are all people who are just very accomplished in their own right. So, that talent has been helpful. So one of the things that hasn't really been a challenge is the cast. I mean, I'm grateful that we've had this amazing cast, and then James Strong, our director, and Mike, our DP, and on down the line. Crispian Salas, who's the production designer, is a genius. He's just a mad genius, that guy. And so he could look at an empty warehouse and turn it into this incredible, in this incredible space to bring these things to life that just didn't exist. So
So
uh,
cool.
we were very fortunate to have just a lot of really talented people, and I think that's so important is surround yourself by really talented people. I like to say if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. I want the people around me to just be so good that they make me look better than I am actually, just because I was smart enough to assemble them, and then
Right.
all boats rise with the tide, right? So, um, but yeah, in terms of just bringing this film to market or getting this film done, or trying to get a film that talks about Russian authoritarianism and journalists being killed. I mean, that's a topic that some people want to stay away from. I think there's been a little hesitancy on the part of certain distributors or financiers or partners that we could have had who are still remembering back to when Seth Rogen and team did The Interview, which kind of had a unflattering look at a dictator in North Korea, and that led to European hackers hacking Sony Pictures, and that was a huge problem for Sony. So we're making a story that is looking at someone who was murdered on Vladimir Putin's birthday in Moscow, and people are maybe a little weary of being part of a project that is taking an honest, truthful look at things that really happened, but nonetheless, suggesting that perhaps there are some regimes that are more oppressive towards freedom of speech than others, and not wanting to poke the bear, as it were. So, yeah, there are definitely challenges there. And then just independent film as a role. I mean, we're looking at in an era where, there are distributors going bankrupt, and I won't name them, but well, one participant shut its doors. They didn't go bankrupt, but they just up and closed and exited the market. And one of the distributors that had acquired one of my previous films went bankrupt and laid off 1,000 employees, and they don't exist anymore. Paramount's for sale, or it has been sold, or was being sold, and I mean, there's just all kinds of uncertainty happening in the marketplace at the same time that we're out trying to make this film and finish this film and sell this film and distribute this film. So I think there's a lot of headwinds kind of working against us over the last few years. Not just us with this picture, but I think a lot of independent films. And I think you're seeing that in the fact that a lot of people aren't working in the industry. There's this whole push now to try to bring productions back to California, and it's because so many people in our industry just aren't working. The work isn't happening, or it's happening overseas, or it's not happening at all. And so,
Yep.
yeah, it's definitely been a journey. It's work for sure, producing in this climate. But if you persevere, and I think, at least in the case of Words of War, magic can happen. And I'm just so proud of the film that we have and the story that we're telling and the way it's been told. And,
Mm.
and grateful for our partners, Neon and Bleecker Street, are two of our distribution partners. They have a joint venture, Decal, that's taking care of the streaming and the TVOD and the home entertainment side. And then Rolling Pictures has been driving in partnership with them, and Concourse Media, the theatrical distribution of this domestically. We have great partners with our foreign distribution partners, Signature in the UK with the theatrical release, then streaming and whatnot following, Eagle in Italy, and there's 26 other countries where this film's going to be available vertical. So, the partners that have stepped up and really embraced this and are making Words of War available to audiences around the globe are really just some of the finest people in the industry, and I'm so grateful for their belief in this story and support of ensuring people have the ability to see it. Because for this film, it's not just entertainment. Some of the other films I've made, I feel are entertaining films. It's a good date night movie, or it's a good thought-provoking story, perhaps, but it's nonetheless entertainment. This film, Words of War, feels like it's more than that. There should be an impact campaign around these issues. That's why we're donating a portion of the proceeds to these organizations that help journalists. Um, it's just there's so much more than just the entertainment aspect of what's happening here with this film, and we hope that it sparks conversations. We hope it raises awareness about subjects that people might not have otherwise been aware. We hope that It reminds people of the importance of freedom of the press, and that when authoritarians are trying to eliminate press freedoms, they're trying to eliminate freedom for all of us, because the whole reason to shut down a free press is that there's no one to hold you accountable for all the other freedoms that you're going to take away. So an attack on the free press is an attack on everybody's freedoms.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so this film
Yeah.
is so much bigger than just the story about one courageous woman.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. They're the, fourth person in government, if you will, the fourth entity rather in government to hold them and each of them accountable. And when you silence that, then they can do whatever they want,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
for that reason that Sean Penn is one of our executive producers on the film. Congressman Eric Swalwell is another. They've both been huge advocates around this issue. Um, uh, Sean Penn is he's a huge advocate on so many levels, but he had been in Ukraine and saw Russian
yeah,
aggression up
right.
close, and so
Yeah.
the cause is very important to him. Eric
Yeah.
Swalwell has been a champion for journalists and free speech, for forever. He's the member of Congress who introduced the Journalism Protection Act, I think twice, to try to legislate protections for journalists to ensure that they should have the right to go to work without fear of death or reprisal for doing
Yeah.
their job with integrity. And these days, that's not always the case. So both of them have been huge supporters, and I'm so grateful to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you got to be I think another thing to take away from that, you listen everybody out, is that a film to get a story like this out takes a village. It takes a tribe of people, and you can't do it alone. But you need to carry that mantle because she deserves it. Her story, her legacy, her life matters, and so many get snuffed out that we don't know about. And so the fact that we know this and you're bringing it to life is truly powerful in a lot of different formats. Um, who is making some stuff that you love right now? Who are you a fan of? I totally agree with you when you were talking about just how difficult it is right now in the industry. I was even potentially going to ask you about that. Mark, I've never like gone on LinkedIn and seen so many friends with that green circle of like, I need work, and I just feel so bad. And they're all my filmmaking friends and just so many of them. And people are having to pivot and learn new things and do things. But I do see those like yourself persevering and finding a way to make it through. But the mountain is hard to climb right now. It's a wet, muddy mountain at this point. But who's making stuff out there that you're saying, man, this team out there, this person, this crew is doing it right? Who are you a fan of?
I tell you, I'm encouraged by the fact that for if you look at just like the last 5 or so years with the Academy Awards, whether it's Anora this year or it was Parasite a few years back or Nomadland, these are not big studio tentpole, superhero films that are winning Best Picture. These are films in the $5-6 million range, the same range that we work, that are telling character-driven stories in a very compelling, engaging way, and are finding that resonates with audiences still, which is, I think, so important. It's great to see a $6 million film win Best Picture. It's great to see a foreign language film win Best Picture, or Nomadland, who, there was one actress in that film that I could have named, and everyone else were largely
Yeah,
real people or unknowns, and I think they made
yeah,
it $5 million.
yeah.
It won Best Picture. It was a very powerful look at the subjects that it dealt with there. So, that's what gives me hope that there is a place for well told independent stories, and then also on the part of theater owners. At CinemaCon just recently, a recurring refrain of a lot of the talk there, and what's going on the exhibitor side of our industry is that people want, during COVID, everything went day and date, right? Where you'd make a film and you just put it out everywhere all at once, and people are watching on their phone or their iPad or at home or on their cable box, and maybe you'd be in the theater, although maybe no one would go see it in the theater. Or why would you if you could just stay on your couch and watch it, at the same time? One of the things we've tried to do with Words of War is to go back to, we've got a proper theatrical exclusive, right? There's a 45-day window where the film's only available in theaters. If you want to see
Awesome.
this movie, you've got to go to a movie theater and see it. And that's because we want to support the theaters. We don't want theaters going bankrupt. We don't want theaters going out of business. We want to give people a reason to go back to the theater to see
That's
a film.
right. Yeah.
It's not just a superhero movie or something.
Right.
And then we'll have our TVOD and our streaming and the other windows that'll follow, but it's more of a traditional model. And I think what you're hearing from theater owners is that there's a desire to encourage more of that, across the industry. That let's give people a reason to come back to the theater, see films on the big screen the way they were intended to be seen, not on your phone. That's. I have kids in their 20s. I guess they're not kids anymore, but there are people in my family in their 20s who don't own television sets. I mean, if it's not on their phone or their iPad, they don't see it. I don't know that that they see understand the need for having a television, and I'm not sure how often they go see movies on the big screen in the theater either. And that's something that I hope that if we could put out content that people want to see and put it out in a way that encourages them to go back and experience it theatrically, that we could help ensure that becomes a vital part of the industry moving forward for independent films, not just Marvel movies or big studio films. So
Yeah.
there's some classic films from years ago. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis had a film called My Left Foot that was, I think, won all kinds of awards and was such a brilliant piece of cinematic art. And if you made that movie today, no one would show it and no one would see it. I mean,
Mhm.
I think the door has been closed too often towards you know towards independent uh, cinema and verite, and I think it can't all be superheroes. It can't all be you know these big studio films. There's a place for other well-told stories as well. At least that's what I hope. I mean,
I do too. No, I hope as well, and I do love the theater experience. I still love going to a communal kind of storytelling opportunity where if the film hits right, then you're all in it together. I love still getting the popcorn, even though I'm doing the low carb thing right now. I love getting the giant soda that makes me go to the bathroom at least twice during a long film. But all that is part of the process. And I want my kids to experience those things. And so I completely agree with you. I don't want it to go away. And yet I do recognize, kind of like you're alluding to, that if the same fare that the studios are putting out, if that's all they got, I'm kind of done. I'm tapping out on the Marvel superhero stuff. And I know if I wait a couple weeks, oh, okay, there's another one. Wow. It came to my TV magically. But if there's a film like this where there's a 45-day window, which I think is smart, and a way to get them to the theater, then we can reignite in something in them that ignited in us. And that is a proper way of viewing a story of that epic scale, to be able to see it in the magnitude and amongst other people, being around other people. There's like 20 reasons now to just stay by yourself and in isolation, but a film gives you a reason to go out and just, you don't even need to talk to anybody else. Although I do a lot of times talking to strangers in the theater, but there is something about just being amongst other people is a good thing and
Yeah,
health.
there's an energy that's shared when you're watching things in that collaborative sort of way where people are reacting, and that you hear it, you can feel it as the story is being told on the screen, and the audience is immersed in responding to that story. That when you're surrounded by people experiencing the same thing in that same way, it's a much more engaging way to experience that story than just watching it on a little phone or watching it at home alone on your couch. And film is such a collaborative medium to begin with. That's one of the things I love about it. It's not a solo pursuit. It takes all these people, each with their role, to create what you see on screen. And so it would be a shame if that's experienced in a solitary way rather than as a part of a broader community. So I'm thrilled that Words of War is in theaters. I hope people will go find it. You can go to wordsofwarmovie.com and find out where it's screening near where you are. Every week, more screens are being added as the theatrical expands. So, definitely check and find out where it is. And if you don't see something, check back the following week because it may have expanded to a place that's convenient to where you are. And then, grab, two friends or 10 friends or 100 friends and make them go see it with you in the theater and share that experience together. And then go to IMDb and put a rating, go to Rotten Tomatoes and tell others what you thought. If you liked it, great. If you didn't like it, that's fair. But let your voice be heard and be part of that whole process because it's always nicer to see a film with 1,000 audience ratings than 10. Just you don't really feel like those lower numbers really have as big of an impact than when you see people actually took the time to engage around a story that they saw and share what their experience was. So I definitely hope people will embrace this and go see it and hopefully appreciate it, for what it is, and tell
Yeah.
others, encourage others to go see it as well.
No, absolutely. And it, like you said, there's a lot of films that are like date night films. This is a story that is saying something. This is a story that matters. It's one that you should see, and yet it, as hard as it is potentially of a subject matter, it is done in an entertaining and engaging way. And I would highly encourage everybody to go see it on the theater. I think there's no other way to do it. And then make sure, like Mark was saying, it does actually help not just the film, but imagine when you say film, all the people that you're really talking about, all the individuals that are part of it. When you put up your rating on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, that you're magnifying it out by all the many people that sacrificed to make this story come to life from day one. I can imagine that producer of in the UK, her finding the story and then, having to go through and then seeing it up on the big screen and what that can do when just a simple little thing of putting a rating up, what that can do for, the whole project. Um, what are you, do you have any books that you would recommend, or if books, we can extend it out to, have you attended any workshops that really hit it right for you or nailed it for you that you would recommend, or any training that you've done that you're like, oh my gosh, every independent filmmaker needs to do this? So books, workshops, or training in the context of film producing, story, anything to recommend?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it depends on what your role is. I mean, if you're a line producer, it's a different answer than if you're a producer, than if you're in any other role across, the creative collaboration. So I don't know that I'd recommend just one thing that's kind of a generic, will appeal to everybody, but definitely know your craft and do as much as you can. I mean, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm always wanting to get involved with groups like yours or groups like other people's. I'm an active member of the Television Academy. I'm an active member of the Producers Guild. I'm an active member of Women in Film and Video because they're an inclusive group. Even though I'm don't necessarily identify as a woman, I serve on their board, and I'm part of a mentorship group there that helps try to lift up emerging voices within the creative community. And so those are all the things that I try to do, because when I was an emerging creative, someone was a mentor to me, and these organizations had workshops or resources. Sundance has their whole Sundance Collab series that is a great source of information and networking as well. And networking is, I think, key. It's not as much, it's important who you know, but I think it's even more important who knows you. I mean, it's good that I know who I could call when I need some help with something, but if you can get to the point where when someone else needs help with something, they think to call you because they know who you are, that's an even better thing. And so that all comes from just building that network, being honest, being truthful, being good, following up, show up, follow through, honor your commitments, and, build that reputation as being, that kind of dependable person that people can count on to make things happen. And boy, I tell you, that'll sure help you go much further than if you develop the opposite reputation in the industry. So I think, in all those ways, yeah, there's a lot you could do to try to help constantly elevating yourself and where you are in your work, in your team, and hopefully that comes through with the films that you're creating and sharing with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like it, man. Well, we already kind of mentioned where people can find you. So it's Rolling Pictures, but right now, and I've talked to independent filmmakers about this, like, what should I put forward, my production company or the film? Right now, it's all about the film, because with no film, if the film doesn't, there's no company. So right now, I believe we're going to point you to wordsofwarmovie.com. That's where I think everybody should head to find out, because as Mark said, it'll be updated often about where you can also find a film. And then off there, they have, of course, the offshoots of Social, and then Rolling Pictures is Mark's production company. But right now it's Words of War. That's where we need to bang the drum and really get the message out there. Mark, anything else? Did I miss anything? Any final words?
No, I appreciate you, Ron. I mean, you're one of these guys in the industry who's all about trying to be of service to others. I mean, you're doing your own thing and making your own films, and it's been fun to see the things that you've been part of. But I've always been so impressed that you take the time to try to give back and help elevate others. And I just think that's so important, because it is kind of a small community, and it does take a village to kind of help emerging talent, kind of break through and find their way and be seen. So I just really appreciate you helping others be seen, and I hope that something we said today is of help and of service to someone else on their own creative journey. And just
Absolutely.
really grateful for the voice that you have and the platform and the work that you do on behalf of everybody. So
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you all listening, watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment, because a comment does actually help. It lets me know, frankly, that somebody is out there listening, which is a good feeling. And it also helps the channel as well. But I believe we're good to conclude our second discussion with producer Mark Maxey. Remember, nothing is wasted, but also just a final word, wordsofwarmovie.com, in theaters now, and let's make sure that we get out and give it a good rating. All right, I'll see you on the next one.